Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I wanted to share with you a reflection on the gospel on this fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time. I've told some friends of mine this just a remarkable story about this young boy I knew, 25 more years ago. He had cancer terribly. He was only about 4 or 5 years old, and it was so bad that he was literally living at City of Hope as they were doing treatment for him. And his mom was telling me the story about how there at the hospital he was in the same section with many other children who were also battling cancer, and some of them older than him, 10, 11, 12 years old. And when they would play together, a couple of the older kids would get a little bit rough. I mean, they were all in pain, and sometimes they were acting out of their pain. And so this poor little guy, he was getting banged around a little bit, and his mom noticed bruises on him and so forth. And so she said to him, honey, these other kids, they're bigger than you, and they're stronger than you. Maybe it's not a good idea for you to be playing with them. And the little boy said to his mom, no, Mommy, I can play with them because I'm strong too. I have the secret powers of goodness. And she didn't know what to make of that. And she told me that story. And I just said to her, where did that come from? The secret powers of goodness. It was remarkable. But in time, thanks be to God, the cancer receded and he was declared cancer-free, and thanks be to God. And we had this wonderful, small, little intimate Mass, family and friends, to give thanks to God. And so as Mass was getting ready to begin, he was sitting up in the front with his mom and dad, and I just had to go up to him and ask him. I said, are you the one with the secret powers of goodness? And he looked at me, just remarkable. And who would have imagined that through something as horrible as cancer in a child, God's grace could come into this world? And it did. Through that terrible cancer, God's grace came into my life. And it's still there now. I still reflect on that little boy and what he said. And in my telling the story, now God's grace comes to you. Who would have imagined something as awful as cancer could bring God's grace to me and to you? That is the lesson that is at the heart of the gospel today, where we see the disciples, as just before they became disciples, were on the lakeside having been fishing all night long and caught nothing, and now they're cleaning their nets, and Jesus comes along and basically commandeers one of their boats so that he can be able to talk to everybody on the seashore. And he finishes talking to them all on the seashore as the disciples are finishing cleaning their nets. And I don't know if any of you know what goes into cleaning a net or if you've ever done that before, but I have once. It's an awful job. Because when you're dragging those nets through the water, you are picking up everything that's in that water. All the trash, all the dead animals, all of the gunk, the moss, you name it, gets pulled up into those nets. And so when you have to pull them to shore and clean them, you have to pick through all of that and clean the net. And the smell is atrocious. And so to finally get all those nets clean, and then Jesus, finishing preaching, says to Peter, hey, let's go back outside into that deep water and throw our nets out there again. Who could have blamed Peter for saying, we just cleaned these nets. Do you know what it's like to clean nets? Who could have blamed Peter from saying to him, I'm sorry, are you a fisherman? No, you're the son of a carpenter. I'm a fisherman. And as Peter did say to Jesus, we have been fishing all night long and caught nothing. There's nothing out there. But then, in what is a remarkable recognition of who Jesus is, Peter says to him, "But if you say so at your word, okay, we'll do it." And he goes back out and makes the remarkable catch of fish that we hear about in the gospel. So great a catch that the other boats had to come out to help him haul in the nets. But that catch of fish is not the real miracle. The real miracle is Peter's recognition in that moment of who he is and who Jesus is. And he falls at his feet and says, "You don't want to be anywhere near a guy like me. Depart from me, Lord, I'm a sinner." And Jesus' response is the opposite. He's just the kind of person that Jesus is looking for and gathers him to himself. And who would have imagined that an empty net could bring such grace into this world? By being out all night long and catching nothing and failing that badly, that this would be the channel through which God's grace would come into the world, come into Peter, and in time, through Peter, our first leader, establish our church, which would change the world. Who could have imagined something like that? You know, maybe a good question for all of us is, where in my life have I been fishing all night and caught nothing? Now, where in my life is it's just not working the way I planned it or wanted it? Where in my life have I just failed or am failing? Usually when I have those kind of moments, my prayer is, "God, make this go away. Make this stop." My prayer is, I don't want to make these mistakes anymore. See to it that I don't. And I want it to come to an end. And we're not alone in that. St. Paul felt the exact same way in his letter to the Corinthians. When he was talking about one of his terrible struggles, he called it his thorn, a thorn in his side. And he wrote, "3 times I begged the Lord about this, that this thorn might leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is enough for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I am content with weaknesses and hardships and persecutions, for when I am weak, then I am strong.'" Who'd have imagined that something as painful as a thorn in your side, something that you're struggling with and it's hurting you, can be the means by which God's grace can come into this world? That Paul's weakness would be the avenue for God's strength. Maybe today we all reflect on, where in my life is that thorn? Where in my life are those empty nets where I've been fishing all night long with no success? What's just not going well and that I wrestle with? Maybe we reflect on that a little bit, and then we ask ourselves the question, where in the middle of that do I see God's grace coming into this world? Because it most certainly is. Who would have imagined that through terrible childhood cancer, God's grace would come into the world? Who would have imagined that a thorn in the side became the means by which God's strength would come into the world? Who would have imagined that in our own struggles, that they also can be a channel for God's grace to change our life and the life of those around us? Who would have imagined it?